Look, blisters suck. They really suck. And you've probably already tried having a really bad blister that's prevented you from playing a couple of times in your life. I mean, if you haven't, you're one of the luckiest players I've ever heard about. And probably a liar, because we've all had them. But in today's video, I'm gonna give you a few tips on what you can do to not only prevent blisters, but also what you can do if you're too late and you already have one, or two, or three. In which case you're unlucky. But if you need any of the gear I'm talking about to help you cure blisters or prevent them, you can buy everything in the link to Unisport right up there. Let's do it. But let's start at the root of the problem. Why do you get blisters? Well, there are three main culprits here, and that is heat, moisture, and especially friction. And friction in this matter is the big killer. Because friction, now I'm just gonna be clear here, I've not had any problems with blisters in either of these, but I just have to use some boot for an example, so don't worry about it. But friction means that you basically get a little bit of rubbing off the boot against the foot, or the foot against the boot. Either way, that friction and rubbing causes blisters. In the long run at least. And that can be either in the heel, which is pretty common, but also under the ball of the foot or even in the toe of the boot. Basically, when you have all these little micro movements inside of the boot as you move around, that causes the friction. And that could be either because the boots don't really fit you well, meaning that there are areas that are basically too tight around your foot, causing the micro rubbing and the micro friction as you move around. Or alternatively, maybe because, again, the boots don't really fit you well, or they're just too loose in some areas. There's a little bit too much space for the foot to, again, move around in, cause the friction, and in turn, cause blisters. And blisters suck. But how do you then eliminate said sucking from the blisters? Well, the best way to start is actually to make sure that you try and eliminate as much of the friction inside of the boot as possible. Whether that's eliminating the slippage, the movement of the foot inside of the boot, or eliminating as many of the squeezing or the pressure points as you probably can. Or both, if you really want to go pro. And the best way to start is to ensure that you get a pair of boots that fit you right. By saying right, I don't mean, okay, I can kind of live with this, but no, it needs to fit you right, meaning that you basically need to get a pair of boots that give you a good, close, snuggish fit that follows your foot relatively close, but without giving you any unpleasant pressure points, both on the heel, out here, but anywhere, basically. And also where you don't have too much space causing that foot slippage inside the boot. And that is where you really need to feel with your feet. I know it sounds a bit daft, but you basically need to feel if there are any pressure points, any unpleasant stuff on your foot when the boot is on. Do you have a little bit too much space in the heel? But it might then be your dream boot, but if you have any of those issues, you should probably just accept that it's not the boot for you and move on. Because if you don't, yeah, cool, you might have a really nice boot that you always dreamed of, but if it gives you blisters, it's just not it. But the thing is that even if you have the best fitting boot in the world, there will still be a little bit of movement inside of your boot. That's really hard to avoid, especially, of course, if you play on artificial grass pitches, because then when you plant your foot, the boot kind of stays in place and your foot will just continue to move a little bit. So slippage will happen, but there actually are things that you can still do to try and at least minimize it. And one of those things is grip socks, which are great at not only making you feel comfortable, but also eliminating blisters because they basically go in and they grip the insole, acting as a connection between your foot and the boot. And that means that when you plant your foot and your foot starts to move, it grips the insole and it stays kind of connected a little bit better to the boot, eliminating the slippage and the friction. And thus in turn, of course, at least minimizing the risk of getting a blister. And of course then, if you want to go really pro, you can combine grip socks with the runner's loop, which is a lacing technique that's super simple but very, very effective. Basically, it goes in to lock the top part of your foot onto the sole plate and into the heel. And what you do is take out the lace from the top lace hole. So when you have it at the second to last lace hole, instead of going across, you just go straight up here and you put it in, basically making this little loop. You do that on both sides of the boot. And then when you put the boot on, you basically take this lace, you put it through the opposite loop, do the same thing here, put it through the opposite loop, and then once you pull the laces tight, it really goes in to just lock that top part of the foot in place. And that also means that it's gonna push the foot down onto the plate very securely and push it back into the heel. And the more firmly it's locked on and in place, the less it's gonna slide and move around. Again, meaning a lower risk of getting blisters. So grip socks and the runner's loop, I'm not saying it's the answer, but it's a very, very good pro tip. But as much as I would love to promise you that you're never getting a blister in your life again if you do your homework and go with the right fit and grip socks and the runner's lube, there is still a risk that you will get a blister one day. And what can you do if/when that's going to happen? Well, I mean, if you get a blister, you get a blister and it sucks. And the best way to actually get rid of the blister and allow your foot to heal is to just get out of your footwear, get out of your boots or your shoes, and just let your foot breathe in the open air. Take off your socks and give it some rest. But let's be honest, we're football players, we usually have trainings or matches in the weekend, so we're probably gonna have to go and play, right? I want to go and play despite having a blister, so what can you do? Well, if you have like minor blisters, small pressure points, you can use this medical tape called Mercure tape. It's like a foam tape. It has a little bit of like thickness to it. It has this padding to it that's really interesting. So it's nice and like stretchy, and it's not perfect, but for those like beginning blisters, smaller blisters, it does relieve a little bit of the pressure coming onto the skin with that. But of course, if you have a slightly more nasty blister, you need the good stuff. There is of course the classic blister plaster, which I'm sure we've all seen. And it basically goes in to act as a bit of a second skin. So your boot is not gonna be rubbing against, you know, that very virgin skin underneath the blister. It's not good. But the thing is with the blister plaster is that I think we've all tried putting it on and then it comes off after playing for 5 minutes. Then it crumbles up inside your sock and it rubs against your skin, and it's not nice. So the key here is to warm it up nicely in your hand for like 30-45 seconds before you put it on. And then afterwards, you hold it in place, again, warming it with your hand on your foot to basically ensure that the plaster sits nicely on your foot and keeps out all the sweat and the moisture. Because if it gets in under the blister plaster, you're screwed. It's gonna fall off. So those are two like ways to at least relieve the worst pain if you are unlucky and get a blister. But you know, it's not perfect. But look, if I'm honest, the best thing is just to try and avoid getting a blister in the first place, because blister relief, it works, but it's not perfect either. And what I will say is that if you can feel a blister coming, you know, you can feel it forming there because your skin is starting to ache or there's a pressure point, something like that, stop what you're doing and change things. Maybe change the fit of your boot, or maybe even change your boots. I know it sounds daft, but I always have a backup pair of boots in my bag if I'm testing a new boot and I can feel, just trying it around, oh, it is a little bit stiff, the fit isn't perfect. I always have a backup, because you might feel that, yeah, I can power through and just play through it, but it'll only make things 10 times worse if you just let it happen. So avoid the blisters if you can, because otherwise it's just gonna be your own fault. But guys, what is your best tip to avoiding blisters? Well, let me know in the comment section right down below. Remember that you can buy either your new boots, if you hate the ones you have, or all the blister tape and all that stuff in the link to Unisport right over there. Of course, also don't forget to subscribe with the notifications on, and if you want to learn some new skills, yada yada, play this down there, you know the drill. With that, I'm signing off. Cheerio.